sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guratna Mandala Kamniyatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Please.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, Luzawa. Young Mangasuna Kiran Kadul Sutos, two lamni dura, Dos Kurgas and the dura, Samjanga, Seming Japan, Russia. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Jesus.
Oh yeah. Oh, let's start Karsor. Oh, she's in Chabangumura. Take I in a Karkana. Good. Demeda. Oh, the king kitchen and do matter. Do I say only assumption? Oh, then do it. Take a shot. Oh, the kitchen. She's a jambang book, don't it can you come so? When the car so doesn't let you. Oh, yeah, don't you get capsule? Ribenenga dala kebar machanas. Ribenenga dala kebar machanas, ora. Ribenenga dala kebar machana. Pajo Kija, Tamje Kenny Minjurtis. Pabwe Consanto, Sanji Koba top to Mare Sungora. Pajo Kija, Tamje Kenny Minjurti. The Vienna, Shanda Sarche Chisoncher. Teach it to Ribenenga Locore Sungora. The Davana Shanda Sarche Chisondas. And then Tony Quincy says, tell it as a chas. O Tatunda Shira Parjin in Yamlela Lokur Watch and Jusaba. Shira Parjin in Yamlela Lobecapso, Shirap de la Shirap Sum Songudua. Tandam dog be Shirase, Kunzup dog be Shirase, Tan Chawa dog be Shirase, Shirap Sum Songura. O Tinaneta, Tandam dog be Shiras, the Tombani dog be Shirap, Tisongurdo. Java Dobe Kunzu Dobe Shirap Sudu, Ribenanga Changbe Shirap Telesongudua. So Chanju Sembanamjo, Ribenanga Vata, Shiro Tesum La Chang, and Nishiro Paru de Chimbachaco with Songudua. O Tina and Tambutele Tarik Basingazu, Keterva, Kezeshag, Sigiti, Abuja Shed, Sigurdo. Sigi Sumda, Sanyama Sertato Sigara, Tarik Base. And then Tenzirik was Tarik Badi Yabuchi Chana, and he Shanda, some Shanda, Geshe, the church, the Kanga, Yabuyunguardo, ane simchen shenle tarikba tuna keyi tuzu yabu lab tuna mindachili keyi malabina ane kege kubo ka trama shingi chagira sa keyi lab kuya to shenda keyi lab yata soso ke keyi yabu shinga tunda liya keyi li changore tarikba li changore sungu to chanju samba solo sungu yar ngarazo chibara tarikba se tene tenji rikba se de te kyangya mare chigla sheba kyangya mare chigla le sheba de soso ke namju ke tone pa lengin Geshe ba che gore se tingo ne se timba se tenji rikba lo gore rikba le lo gore te chene rikba de kyen de do ase de yin go de le trupchin de do ase tenji kyusen yo gorwa 다시 미치 감지 쇼르네 치데 임베 규생 가레스네 코 인당 일로 콩케고라 치데 마레스네 멤베 멘다 멜로 콩케고라 어들레 텐지릭 바세 자 다릭 바데 텐지릭 바니 버텔라 자주 셈바 저 로고레 송고르노 테말로나 상게 코바 톱토고 마레세 티데 니도서 아릭 베 니나 티네 소릭 바다 소아릭 바시기도 소리 바셔야지 잘라 소신해들어 람가 소신기는 모터 소신기는 낭장마 소신기는 가르신기는 지신이 지조를 펜토에 자와지어라 소자여라 강바소야를 소바 가르인데 잘라 밀코에 쪽지소야다 아니 자다 지저저 사야 통해서 강가 연구라 어디 소리 바세 심전리가 고고 방배치도 내가 깔레메 용했던 달이야 고야 그 고고 감배치도 다르발로 로고래 마르가서 소리발로 로고래 성구다 근데 소리바세도 그미 매 당신에 암지도 좀 매야부 당신에 아니 미 뒤마인 배치올에 겹투 그래 뒤마인 배치오 나저런다는 매 당에 tra야도와 아니 남균에 소부탄당 제 대했던데 트레이딩 가르치고 있는 맨디 사고를 칼란디 사고를 데레스바 밀을 랍신거라 자고 내 매바 던다 뒤마인 배치와던 소부탕부용에 던다래 ran tabu je mishenda labi tendalia merigba soarigba se megirigba derwa tele logure songudwa ani ta na derigba derwa na derigba sene soso go simgi dewe tenda chamba da nyingji chaju go sim tongba ni to bola soba soso ge shengi ten tuye la koyage neju de kanga shinye tendalia soso tamje kemba kyen seba tende yoye chanye de la na derigba le changwa songudwa ti chi rigba nyangala 로고레세 자주 선바도를 슈바다 죽바시 님고도와 자주 선바난 게 슈고레스도 초람바도를 슈바 죽바송고도와 신의 주에들라 슈바스도 사톱상게 사담부니 버숨바야 사마제보도 간사도를 슈바스 르베냥알 슈고레송고도 세상에 가르셰고르스네 자주 선바이나야 사톰볼레네야 태조 강갈 장고레송고도와 대신데 주액체도 어디지 교나
No.
Sometimes.
So here from the master Maitreya, from the ornament for the sutras, to begin with a quote from that. Here he says that if you're not skilled in the 5 sciences, then there's no way that even Arya beings, superior beings, can become omniscient. So therefore we need to train ourselves in those 5 sciences. So when we're thinking about how it is that we attain the state of Buddhahood, in order to do so, we need to train in the perfection of wisdom, bring that to its culmination. And training in the perfection of wisdom means developing these 3 types of wisdom, basically. The first type being the wisdom realizing the ultimate. Then there is the wisdom realizing conventional things, understanding conventional or the phenomenal, as well as the kind of wisdom that understands how to engage in the sort of benefit for others. So here, that first type, the wisdom realizing the ultimate, is referring to the wisdom realizing emptiness. And here, the wisdom of the conventional includes these the trainings in the 5 sciences. So we need to train in these in order to be able to eventually benefit others and reach that state of Buddhahood. So training in the 5 sciences, the first of those is grammar, understanding letters and words and how we put those together. This is something that we need to understand as a basis for ourselves, as well as be able to teach to others such that they are able to engage with words and understand them. And that alone, though, is not sufficient. We don't just want to be able to sort of engage with words and just sort of know their surface meaning, but then we need to train in the kind of science of logic and reasoning. So the second science is like dialectics or logic, wherein we are able to evaluate the things that we are reading and hearing and understanding in order to see, is this something that has a reason behind it? Is this something that is valid? And be able to find those kinds of valid sources and valid reasons in order to establish things. Again, to reach Buddhahood, we need to develop these kinds of sciences or learning in order to perfect our perfection of wisdom. So here, again, moving beyond just the kind of those first two of the logic, the sort of science of grammar and logic, there's also the kind of, the science of building or sort of craftsmanship, those kinds of things that we can build and develop for the benefit of others. So knowing things like how to build roads or cars, those sorts of things that we use in society in order to meet the temporary needs of people, to alleviate their kind of temporary suffering. So everything from knowing how to build houses to food and agriculture and those kinds of sciences, those are needs that beings have. And to fulfill those kinds of temporary needs, one should be trained in that science as well, the kind of crafts and arts. As well, one needs to have training in medicine. So knowing how to kind of protect against untimely death, to protect the vitality and health of others, training in medical sciences, not just to be able to sustain our own body and health, but to be able to help others and protect them against that kind of suffering. This as well is one of the 5 sciences. And then finally, the 5th is sort of the inner science, the science of working with our own mind. How do we tame our own mind? So developing things like the understanding of emptiness and the understanding of compassion and bodhicitta and so forth, how we remove our faults and develop good qualities. All of those kinds of trainings are included within that sort of inner sciences. So bodhisattvas engage in these sciences, in these sorts of learnings, and it is indispensable to proceed to Buddhahood. And so it'll come farther down in this quotation from the ornament for the sutras, but there are these 2 words, those bodhisattvas who are on the path of accumulation and the path of preparation, we say, are sort of engaging in those the trainings of those sciences, whereas bodhisattvas on the path of seeing and above are sort of already engaged or sort of entered into in a more kind of concrete way.
Oh yeah, soda leji neji request to soda nyamdo leji neji request karasido to chongjawe benjo chongjawe yorwa chala pazu ke da mele ko kanso soda chongda shingle la so basungdo shingle leji tando tabe da kimi saya thwe kora o tezo sungdo o tezo logurese di shirab sumginane simjengi tanjawe shirab singade kare sungursa wa tinale dire karse simjen tamjeli ya che gida chimala kwebe tikbe le maingba shenda ge tene kogu kare ne tezu kanga shimbachene tezu lobachene pento bachagu resungudwa simje tamje girwa didan chime kana mato asu tikbe le maingge shenda kogu kare ne wa tezu shimbachene tubachagu resungudwa oh yeah o tichilana.
So then included with the kind of science of arts and crafts, we can include the kind of science or learning in terms of business, how we do get the goods to people who need them, as well as kind of agriculture and those sorts of sciences that are necessary to feed us and support us. So among, again, these 3 types of wisdom, we need to sort of train in all of them, including the kind of wisdom that is engaging in the benefit of others. So knowing how to benefit others in a way that doesn't have any kind of non-virtue attached to it. This is something that bodhisattvas, this kind of training in these sciences is indispensable for bodhisattvas.
Oh yeah, tatanda gatanda karishegursudu. Chanju sembaya tani satumbalem getazu tezu logursungyara. Sanje peru sori chanju semba tongbani shaji komnya satumbalem getsolia. Nyamshale ya lane sora ta nyambar masha digdose kira Yeshi ge soya wose ta sunam ge sosa simje shandal pemba truse sunam ge so de choni yungui ba simje shandal chöshaya de seba komya ta tini chi tanda shebane shi pendo tuwege lega tuzul chongu resche nyamshale ya langboye se ungudoa o teachire o tiende karse gore se tanganju tanda karalamni tugore sene chanju semba tezuge ko chanju chodo semgene ne shagi tando ya shingle chebala soba chongja la soba shal pendo yoba kanga chegudoa o tiende ngarazu samba sangboche lega chiduzina ngone kimzane je chöde yonggodoa 나라서 남비 지조데 대도도 남미다 미든 저치도 최매바시 아니 최스도 소소치 지보 삼루라다 덤버도 야나 곰데 잡치네 티장야 삼루당도 왔디 말와 컨디체에 대해 덤버데에 소말람도 소사기요라 아니 곰게에 소소 셈레 섭주게요라 티제 티 고바데 가르선 지조난 루두자 leptuza nal nang mitsulun drawachidu chizo nalun drawachidu chogwa nalun drawachidu Geshe lunga chebachidu tidi chölepkuyoara ti indeza nangminen gotsuse padamala ningurchaase sanji tashi chimben dole songudwa tashibu tambu tashibu yongya yakbu yongya tabshikarso tambu kimzanen gotsu songyoara padamala ningurchaase sosi pamash deyona tozuli shabji yakbushi chambada tsewe kone 소소 부다 pomolabri tende yebene 사상이나 nangmisuina o tezoliya jamje kone tseweche songsora jambazewa didu nyonggeji samje ro chalana shi pechuche arbuji sam tende membache o di kolebe tawandole tungen mendo bare samje tsewe tone tawa tungen de tende da tawa de tende ko samle tone namjune ene kon dawache nangmine gotso songudwa Geshe tangputene yungurisa. O tiende tezo chöle gyure yora. Te chöle gyurgo yora, gewale gyurgo yora. Chödan chö mayimba aside, chö mayimba su tigbal sigora. Chö side gewadele sigora. O tiende nganzo ina namju shingle che chong gewa tezo ina te gewa membe tigbal sunro sigira. Kulungu mandi na te tigbal rigira wako. Kulungu emba che milung gogo tanya da soso chigbu tonda ina te yunguro wako. Gewa yung membe tigbal indro sigira. Tende marese shenla pendo sambe chanju semba ga semjenla pendo wa chagin sam te tondale ane chi chala pazo ke ya song ke ya ina dra sodena lega chenge ina dra ke je tandala imba ngazo ke labge ina dra mengana lega chenge ina dra khangba changma songge ina dra pugul tangge ina dra kanga sem sangbe tona mele pento ye nge pemba ya lega ya bu chigin sam pendo ya bu chigin sam je 내가 제번에 소소 가보 제번에 겨울은 좋아 파조티 밀레 팬토 강가 용거라 근데 전주 선배이나야 곰장장 잡지 장장 지야 된다 말와 소제날 전주 선배 요시 그래 신변날 전주 선배 요시 그래 깨람게 개겐톨 맹가나 내가 챙겨 용시 그래 어떠도 전주 선배 선배 권에 내가 뜻을 송구래 송구도와 그 생각만 가지고 된 로서 chanju samba chanju chodo semke chasona ane kabri ra roase chang tongge yonggu ara kabri ra roada zemo che da tinde yina ya ko semjenge tando chanju chodo semke be kewad zane gyunche mese ni kube ina da karesna ko kona mese kona semjenge to shembe da lo tangsara ne ko te soya tanda ko ni nye da zemo che da luchung che da tinde saya tongye da tinde chebe yonggu ara 어때서 강가 개발은 이거를 차고 그도와 저도 가지고 남겨 소소 가르치기나 내가 쳐야 돼 삼바 상부터 내잖아 어찌졸 팬토위에 삼치졸 팬벨 내가 지금 삼 뒤에 개발 위에 최준도에게 탑시 쳐오라 가지고 될라저를 질래자 근데 다 최 멤버 순도지 그 삼로 거기도와 그런 야구 삼로 때문에 쳐야 그라 뭐냐게 개와서 개와카시 거라는 신 개발을 카시 꿀lun기 거네 개와다 메게 얼룩마테를 줘요라 자 그걸로 상부 거네 제베네 거 개와 요르고도 와 어때 손자 tinre 거네 남중아라 줄래가 가르치고 있는다 지소나 내가 지나 속변나 내가 지는데 나를 뒤도 삼바 상부 토네 나제다 콘도다 차도다 전심다 매버서 참바다 세야 거네 제베네 소소 끼바 밀 차도 제고 말은 나제 제고 말에 로와 납신nep신 제고 말에 소소 semba 끼부 류대보 셈대보 아니 라던 로디 칭게솔레 대보 어떤데 용거라 대소자 대소 chanju sem발 딘데 제고를 손데 는 알아줘도 야롬게서 신에 자제 야티 냠레텔 제수 챔바 제고라 어디지구나 이리 말아 Yeah.
Mhm. So the reason, sort of what I'm explaining here, where it is talking in the ornament for the sutra, is about how bodhisattvas, even like all the way up to the point of Buddhahood, they need to train in these various sciences. And so it's not like when we think about sort of bodhisattvas, we might think that they're in meditative equipoise and that's when they're really doing their practice. But it's actually the case that they come out of that period of meditative equipoise where they're accumulating all of this the sort of accumulation of wisdom, and they engage in the accumulation of merit through various practices in those periods of subsequent attainment. They engage in generosity and patience and so forth. And so here, I guess what I'm trying to really say is that a bodhisattva, again, whatever they are doing is held with that attitude of bodhicitta. Thus, they are, whatever kind of actions they engage in go toward the benefit of others. And so often we sort of think of our Dharma practice as something separate, like we're out living in society and that's kind of our non-dharmic activity, and then we go do Dharma by sitting on a cushion and maybe saying our prayers or doing kind of meditation. But we really shouldn't see it as separate in that way. The times that we are sitting on our cushion and meditating and saying prayers are in order to be able to practice the Dharma when we are interacting with others in society. And so we need to have that kind of recognition that whatever we are doing, we should do with a positive kind of intention. Whatever kind of activity engaging in society, we should wish that all of the actions of our body, speech, and mind be in accord with the Dharma, be virtuous by way of our motivation. So here, it's often, there's a sutra in which the Buddha says that the first sort of auspiciousness, the kind of good and auspiciousness begins at home by having respect and love for one's own parents. When we are able to have that kind of love and respect toward others within our own family, where we recognize that they are beings who experience suffering and experience happiness. We don't see them as just like things who don't have feelings, but rather we are able to see them as beings who are living and breathing and having feelings, and we develop that kind of attitude of love and compassion for them. It is in that way, it starts with the family and can expand out from that. That's how we really generate that kind of goodness and auspiciousness. And so we should make this effort to act virtuously, make whatever kinds of activities we do virtuous through that kind of intention. So usually we might think like, well, what's the difference between Dharma and non-Dharma? It's really what did we set our intention to? If we make our intention one that is virtuous, that whatever kind of work we may be doing, whether we're working in a factory or doing some kind of business, or whether we're doing agriculture, if we do it with that kind of intention of, oh, I'm doing this for the benefit of others, then it becomes virtuous. Whereas if we are doing it with this sort of attitude of, oh, this is, I want to just get my paycheck, or I want this just for myself, our acts then become non-virtuous. So here it is in this way that whatever we are doing can become a kind of practice of Dharma, can become a virtuous sort of thing. So, we should recognize that bodhisattvas can be anywhere. There could be a bodhisattva working in a factory. There are bodhisattvas working in fields. They are making effort. Whatever sort of actions they are doing are done for the benefit of others. And that's really what makes a bodhisattva. We see that there are passages that describe once a bodhisattva has given rise to this attitude of bodhicitta, it's never ceasing, such that even if they were to say get a little bit drunk or fall asleep, their virtues are never ending. That kind of attitude, that intention carries forward no matter what they are doing. So we really should make this kind of effort to have a good motivation, such that whatever acts we are doing on a regular basis are really done with a good mind, done pride, without anger, without attachment. And in that way, we are happier, others around us are happier, we're healthier, and so forth. So this is, if bodhisattvas need to do, we too should try to emulate those kinds of practices of bodhisattvas and make whatever it is that we do a virtuous practice through being infused with that kind of intention.
Oh yeah. Oh, 사제르지 예 정말 송게르지나 사 정말 소위나 삼바 상부토네 상마서위나로 아니 랑게 이 다워르 주와 현지 이 다워르 주와 세도 정말 svebe 페네들 소소세메 당부 사제 상마 야부질레서 소소셈 당부 미션다 요네 아데 야부도 섬 당부 지거라 네 제베 레서 봐서 마음반의 소수 농부 약보다 소부 약보다 지 kuyu yabu tindrili kiya lesa gyor, zebe lesa batase. Hane thali maungba na ko takbe shingam kiya wala soba tindrili lesa gyor sungudwa. Chintu ko chunju chi na ko kiya wala gyura che gyor do, zebe lesa. O ti indi ta tunda, nga tsu tu shandarwa. O nga razo namju ne susu nangmi da kaba drodi che ne chizo na droya kapsu. Hane shala tsawa pangbata, shala pamba truba nidi, chamze satira, che ninal dube sungudwa, tangan namjin mabushewa. Tsawa pangbata, pamba truba ninal, che tama dube yin songare. Shala tunge chone digmare, samche tsawa panggiwara. Shala pamba che dewa chone yabure, sam rogba chigiwara. Dewa da trendu se. Dewa da trendu di kyar chiru chinani, tarwe dewa tomna, tendo dewa tomna, sanje koban tomna samsa tinde samtangi wara. Tungenda trendu nega tungenda trendu samlu di kyar chiru dona, kyawa chima tunge meba hlada mi koban tomna, koye tungele tendo tarwa chi chuna sa, ne samlu kortu wara. O ti indi ko, jamba da tsawa siname do, shala tsawa pambata pemba truba niki nalang che sangma tamche nga da gyuben dudore nanzu kombra je kyab chambata niki je tongpa nye kumgu yuna simchen le chakdang me bata niri chakdang me bata tenre soya tanda le ta me da tongpa nye tazu kumgu yora chambata niki samlutan de ti changi yora ane ngone pika le du san ti samluti leba che ura mi ngone tu du san o ta chambe se tewa da tre nam se tunghe ma chuna asa samluti leba che ura ngara soso samlutan bige mile ti kyari kyeso kondu ten ti chene ko samlutan mada ke machora mami so macho te du sa macho chang diga ma ngone kyadi ko ti kyapsa lepsne ti chawara pechu chawara ngara so ti samlutan je nye je toba che samlutan ada ha ko so se chizo na rudu te lep guru ma to chizo na rudu ka ke kyaba che mda ngima na shi tena tanda kare samlutan mada ne pendo machora o ti indu karso gura 소소게 lunga yusum shoga ya langa ta namsa shidage machune o diri nyemutile simjale tsawapang simjale tsawachig mesam sulanda chig mesam chini kane pemba chugi samsa o tene kondu chig me ngaje chig me chado me cha samjine nima nyinga de ne chere lura ya bure lura sa kunu samla tang namju ngazu kamdun de sigdo sanjele kapsu chewose kapten baba toba sanje chumdende kyoko se yonde kundi kira nga lamten baba songi samgora chula kapsu chewose kira ga songbe sawa pangbe chute dan shel pemba tuya chute nga chibi sigora ichi yoro sigora kendun la kapsu chewose o tende chenge chutum genge sanje ga kai chesun jungenge mishenda to yabu chungge to kami yada chenge konzunashin koda timbache o tende chigi sa kendun trosu songi sam tende chene kamru nimare shoge samruta enime kon tije ni konda chipshachi ta jo teringe kar cheso tikba kar saso sude kyare kyapso ngaje karje thado karje dresim karje sam tende samruta adre mendo sam yawo chodo chesu ira chena ene yar dura ngazo nye de nye namju samru che ma da ko chaksen durke pen toyo mara so pen tobo chi kwara pen tokwe de chege lona jura yese che nye so semlia juaji lugo ne pen toyo ra shen che shengen ge de che she de pen tagi yo de pojo de pen to ma do de pojo de samlu tan semlia yar lugo ne pen toyo ra shen ka je shen pen toyo ma do o ti indu na ma do che so tanda da andana la sanje ga sumba na she do anala yungu do ribe ne ngala chan to do gesh keba chen gu do o sanje ga sumba na she chaju samba da to ge satombo le na ya tende simjen le pemba tuwe che do tane shingle da la sobo te zo yan che chale na pemba tu gwe ware ngara zo ge ko nyeri me che na le lega che ba sama simjen la pendo ge sambe ko ne la ne rimji chen le kar so re chawa pang ba tunge tamje da chawa da tewa tamje da demba che tungen ge tanda chama che tu yo ma de mawo ba ne ya wa tende che tungen ge kyo kun se yonde kun dengi 강사 상계 세제로와 탑 상부 타르심바 시럽 타르심바 내니 상계로와 샹기 더 주버 줍통게 샹기 더 주버를 네버 용수 송게 시럽 타르시 란도르게네 사마시 로와 Chambada Zawa Tarshin, Thabkhe Shenjibe Chayu Samvis of Comedy. Tinde Sanje Yakoban, Toba Chagin Samgura. But you remove some of them, Message the Kanya Samta Yomara. Get there was simply going to Rosha, Kawashimaya Langada, Tinde Queen much of a Chane. And it rimmed Sanje Yakomba, Kyoko, Yende Kundengi Kibu. Simpson Tamzelia, Condition and Pendo Troop Tungegi, Kansajin Jorachagi some. Teacher the Chunyangi some. Akuno said, I'm Sember shoes. I did it.
So here we can take just a small example of if we think about, like, say, the activity of just cleaning the area around us. If we clean the area around us, the environment around us with a kind of good attitude and a good motivation, we actually can sort of like purify our own mind and the minds of others who see that sort of environment. And we're actually also creating the kind of conditions, the kind of causes to experience a pure environment in the future, even being born in a pure land and so forth. And so it's really, we should think about the kind of impact of having that sort of attitude, having that kind of motivation, even for doing some sort of small action can have a very large result. And so here, when it comes to the most basic of practices, beginning with our own family, we should think that we are going to, in all ways, abandon harming others and work to benefit others as much as we can. Really, all Dharma is contained within these two. The sort of wish for others to have happiness, wanting to benefit them, as well as the wish that they be freed from their suffering, not wanting them to experience any kind of harm. When we give rise to those kinds of attitudes, we end up sort of expanding them more and more, such that we give rise to this kind of love that wants others to not just have happiness, but have the happiness that is the stable, lasting happiness of Buddhahood. And we wish that others might be freed from their suffering, and expanding that more and more to include all other sentient beings, and also not just their temporary kinds of sufferings, but all of the sufferings of samsara, of taking rebirth again and again. We wish for them to be able to have that kind of state of freedom. So all dharmas, all practices are really directly or indirectly contained within those two, this basic of abandoning harming others and wishing to benefit them. The kind of practices of like equanimity, not holding some close and others distant, even the idea of emptiness and how we get to that state of freedom and so forth. All of this is contained within those two. So here, if we're thinking about training in the Dharma, we have to do so in a way that actually has an impact on our conduct when we engage with others. So we shouldn't sort of like when we are sitting on our cushion be generating love and compassion and so forth, but then when we go out in society and meet people, we're just fighting with them and we have jealousy and anger and so forth. It's like in the way that, say, soldiers, they train to be able to go into battle. They learn all of these different skills such that when they go out and they're actually in battle, they use them. And we are sort of in the same way. We are training in love and compassion and all of these various attitudes in order that we might use them when we are out engaging with people. It's not sort of like something that we should be thinking that is somehow separate from our everyday life. So ideally, when we wake up in the morning, we should have the first sort of thought that we go through should be setting our intention that with our body, speech, and mind, we're not going to harm any others, and we're going to work as much as we can to benefit them. And so we do this, sort of set that attitude, hold it throughout the day, ideally, by going for refuge and generating this attitude of bodhicitta, going for refuge, recognizing the Buddha as being this undeceptive teacher, and the Dharma is something that you have confidence in, that if you give rise to this Dharma within your own mind stream, you too can attain that state of Buddhahood, as well as looking at the Sangha, those that are training in this path and wanting to emulate them. So here, again, we should, at the beginning of the day, set that kind of intention, generating this attitude of refuge and bodhicitta, and then during the day, try to hold on to that ideally, and at the end of the day, think like, well, what did I actually do over the course of the day? Who did I fight with? What kind of mean words did I say? And try to purify, confess and purify those negativities, as well as rejoice in those kinds of positive things that we have done. And so it is in this way that we're able to, over time, improve and really benefit from the Dharma. We need to train in these kinds of practices. Otherwise, it's like we can just hear this over and over again, but we're not actually using it to benefit ourselves in any way. We just are kind of hearing the teachings and allowing it to be some sort of knowledge, but not something that we really apply in our lives. So we should have this kind of attitude of thinking that whatever sort of activities I'm going to do, even a sort of as in the way that even bodhisattvas up to the very highest of grounds do all kinds of different activities for the benefit of other beings. Whatever it is that I'm going to do with this attitude of wishing to benefit others, trying to give rise to this wish that I might become a fully enlightened Buddha, one who has completed the sort of accumulation of merit and wisdom, who has fully perfected the methods and fully perfected wisdom, such that he is able to teach undeceivingly what it is that we should adopt and abandon, that knows kind of all of the points that we are to practice and so forth, and is in that way fully able to benefit other sentient beings. So here again, as we sort of set our motivation for listening to the teachings, we should think that we're striving to attain that state of Buddhahood. And it's not with the sort of short-sightedness of just thinking about this life or even just a few lives into the future, but recognizing that this subtle mental continuum will go on after we cast off this body and the next. And so with that kind of long-term thinking that however long it may take, I wish to attain this state of Buddhahood, complete perfect enlightenment, in order to be able to fully benefit other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should set that kind of motivation for listening to the teachings.
Oh yeah, I'll do it. Oh, the tender one. Oh yeah, oh, the Danga Jukas share started in Ba. Bergy Cabatu with Tombani, Sondu Menda Karis in Yishamba. Chidanko, Narazo Tonde, Sosotan, Sutra, Tero, Jacuranzo, Tessamal Takshe, Cabando Chen, and Mindu, some Chidane, never comes out and degrees, Tomba comes out and degrees, Tendesson Gestua. Yan Cherbuchin that is in Chidan Mindu Samsa, Shechet Mindu Samsa Kash and the Digmarese, Rangwine Truba, Tandaba Truba, Rawando Truba, Narawando Truba Mindu some. So say you don't want the round to Trubashi Medosam. Tras it is a Yidomeo round to Trubashi Medosam. Consul Lega Chetan to Chile, Sosipa, Leva, Tasha, Chimato, round to Trubashi Nipine, near Chikorwa, or the near Yomaris, Tinde Cabang about the Chagures, Sunzu Meda, Nichonsa, or Tina Shingi, Sunzu Shanda, Mamboyor, no, Mamboyore. Tatandanga Chonga, but the Tezo Shiraki Paru Chimbe Dota, Gombulu Druta, Roa, Nene, the Umabe Keva Shambo, Dawa Drabola Soba Roa, or Tezu Pabala Soba. Tezu Shuna Lejo and I said, Sik Tera Pechu Chamato, Sik Shanda Sava, and so Shabu Pechu Chigoma, Tandamba Matuba, Rangwin Matuba, Sutu Matuba, Tandambar Matuba, said Tipechu Chigdoa. I Shanda Keba Keba Soso Yamuse. Ming Meda Tasha, Yasavat the Tane, so Shaba Mambo Hode, Tanda Tisumara. O Tender Mambo use of Tezu Yuna Tezukanga, Dina La Casa. Nanju de Pengelosa Chukanke, any de Yorwa, Kinde Chaja Chimbuso, or Tina Sungutwa, and the Longi Yora, Tezu Tots Meda Yorte, Monepa, Namusha Nejuba Tuzugi. Pechena Sung Shanget to Kanga Malone, Kasha Trandin, the Trandu, the Trandin should do one mind Quebec social maton, did Marsa, did Divisa. Neither Luri Lakesh in Sidua, the Tamachi de Dirida, Lenji Tejur Kaumasi, Lenji Tejur Kaumasi, Tombani that didn't mean Sogioda, Lenji Tejukoma, Nande Royum Yigishi Sera, and Shiji Kitawasera. Shiji Chu, Zokchin said, right? Chakjachimbo, right? Umetati la soba. Oh, today, Sosur Mingdo Mana, Ming Medra Medra Tasha, Mabudu, Setawatulia. Sosur Mingdo Mana, yes. Neither Lori Lacations. Neither is the Subbanation when they race us, soon to neither Sigora. Trandes do de dinde son shade te de mare de de do sam shapa ti combustion da to subshin somewhere is trandes sigora sa kanga sonje sama mi som de abore se dinde sigoma de ngede trandes som pa ta je chena ngone nyamyo chen de nanjur ba to kom kyang ge samlo tanda ngoma de te ne kanga chikbar sil pa go do songora ngede lore la kese ro nyamyo chen de nanjur ba te na kombachi do pause Tesu kanga ka tanda chi ka babgis o tende so su chi yor do o tende so yor de de ko sik menda yo na tanda de menda yo be ngeba yo ma re chi da ne sik menda chi she ge pe chi menda tang yo ne tanda samlo ta sa de chi ka le tende yo re an ka je sik chi ba chi gan yin na ya tanda be kha ga de tende yo ra sik se de ko mi samlo ya tanda de ya ke tanda pe chi chi yo ra 책 담에다 배치 제쇼라 가리네. 상고 책 집어이네. 돈다 집어 치코라 자 집어 지장이네요. 돈다 배 가가 고야 된대 요르도. 배 개와 고야 된대 용거래. 어찌 이제 않고 책 쪼때 말에 책디 삼로 단데 돈다 대 삼로 단서들 오늘 삼로 단에 가시 미강가 돈다 찌기 돌 바고 유지라. 아니 찌기 돌 마바지 고면다 면다 유네고 대견게 거 말도 삼을 거 봐요래. 삼을 수수티 내시 겁나. Yamushieda, Geshe, Kondushie, Chatan Churu, Sober Pengi Hordo. This one's all the rich song do I teach you, yeah, Shuna.
So here, as for where we had left off, what we had been talking about was sort of the views that arose of earlier Tibetan masters. Where here there are some that would say that like for example, if you don't sort of find the thing when one is engaging in ultimate analysis and one can't find whatever thing is designated, there are those that would say that that means that even conventional things are sort of totally non-existent. And now here, when it comes to Gelama Tsongkhapa, he differentiates in this idea that one isn't negating the thing itself, but rather this kind of independent existence or existence from its own side, some kind of inherent existence, other than something being designated by mind. If there is some sort of existence from the side of the object, that is what is being negated here. So when it comes to, we can see that the sort of tradition of exegesis of things like the Heart Sutra and Nagarjuna's texts and the masters like Chandrakirti and Aryadeva, there are terms that they use, and then we see that there are terms that get sort of applied by later Tibetan masters or by various sort of different masters, and they might differ slightly, but we should have a good way, we need to be able to understand what the intended meaning is there. And so this depends upon being able to differentiate between things that are provisional, that need some kind of interpretation, versus things that are definitive. So here, Penchen Losang Chigyen, in his text, his root text on the Gelu tradition of Mahamudra, has a section where he talks about, he says, so from the point of view of individually ascribed names, there are numerous different traditions. We can talk about these sort of things like the simultaneously arising as merged, the amulet box, possessing five, and he lists off these sort of various these names, these terms, the 6 spheres of equal taste, the 4 syllables, the pacifier, the object to be cut off, Dzogchen, the discursive Madhyamaka view, and so on. Nevertheless, when scrutinized by a yogi learned in scripture and logic and experienced in meditation, their definitive meanings are all seen to come to the same point. So here, this isn't just sort of a matter of saying, like, closing your eyes and saying, oh yeah, everything's good. But a yogi, someone who's actually learned in the scriptures and has a kind of experience with meditation, can understand that even though there might be different words or terms that are employed, that doesn't necessarily indicate indicate a difference in the same intended meaning, what it is really trying to get at. That things are spoken in provisional ways for an intended purpose, for a reason. And so one who understands that well is able to see that things can be actually trying to come to the same sort of definitive point. So too, it can be the case that there's a single word, the same sound, but people take it in very different ways, can be understood in totally different kind of connotations. So here, there are different sort of teachings that are given maybe to pacify one's anger or to pacify attachment or for particular purposes. But a yogi who's very much skilled in scripture and logic knows that they're all kind of coming to the same point.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, then just on about something that she said, right? And it die you might do that, so Rabjina ko Namju Sosu Samlu Nalia. Nga Saduzanko Sosu Chidan Sosu de Sosu Ludan, Semdan, Sorodan, Dushita, Tezola, Tension, Delne, and it does the Trashir, the Tendure, the Siming Taje, Ya Tuku Ordon, Sosu de Sosu Tade. Sobodan, Semdan, Sorodan, Dushita, Tezola, Dojin Delne, and then the Trashy race for Mingchita, and got Trashy Namsha Yardo, or Tindico. Then they talk about something about your marriage, Yinea, Naranzo Samlunalia, Nga Sabde, Nangarang, Samsa, Sobodan, Semdan, Sorodan, Dushita, Pab Shane, Menaya. Dinge Chichis, Soso de Tande, Logan de Chive, Samlo Corgedoa, Rawa Chive, Samlo Corgedoa. Oh, Tetabu Rawa, your Marese. Indungakoran, Shishan, Soso Tatil, Samlo Tangoramado, Tas and Nambina Shivache, Tanga Rawa, and getting memory session, Kepengi or Mare. Soso young Jiche, or Nanam Jusso, Low Langi, Samlo Nala Condisido. Nga said Rangone Trubabe said Nangarang yo samsa samgu korgudwa Rawado Yobasigra. One echene da de sosude Luda, Semda, Sorada, Tezola Turgeon Delne, and indeed Tashiri did to do this part of what is some Shaguramado. Sobu Pasha, Sem Pasha, Tata Turgeon Delmeguba, Rawachi Yomardo. O Timindu some Guara. Soso ya soso de namju samlo nal kadis korkdota and nga o samlo de korkdota teta nga de o mare samna and samla pengira nga de namju sambana shi member tong dura ti members nga de yoba shisha nga yora su nga yoba shisha ta rawan du dura se shanda sam tang de ne te pengi o marba ti sam pengi o mara o ti de ya soso tong de ya nga Yidowa, Tra, Ni, Ngombo, Sebo, Kawo, Kamba, Kari Tongu, Sosu Namju Tondu, Kandej Tongu, Tinashi, Rawan to Drubashi, or Maresam, Chashe Mambuchi, Mainge Mambuchi Litene, Sem Patani, the Kamba de Das, Kodaki, Wundachi, Toda Chilitene, the Kamba is Patagua. Mane, Sosu Kamba, the Koran Winetsu, Koke, Wumai, Yanda, Shandaji to Yomarwa. Shandachi so round the tree of Marwa. Or Tinder Samu Kodu, Ta Koran and Drain, Nang de Tina Nepa Tongo Remado, Di Ranja Namjin and Shisha, and then round the Truba Yomar, Tundamba Truba Yomar, Shandachi, never some Tangatana, Mandibu Soda. Tindina Longi and Gudoati Tana Yabu Jire. Chanja River Tojiki, Tangur Amangun said in Aldua, Chanja River, or Tinalia, De Songudua. Oh, Tenekasa. Tata Rare, Losenga Shise, Tinsangara to Lobjo Chengege, Lotu Seva, and each Lobjo Chetengege, Senit Pechatanga to the Sungora. Tsuktup Tendrus or Tala Shenes, Ta Tsuktuba Me, Ta Tembatuba Mes, Tanya Teleshenes, Tasene, Tata Tanya Sedera, Mingdelia, Ta Tsuktup to Truame, Rangune Truame, Tandaba Truame, Nishendaji. Yebe Samluta, Namju Tonde, Tading Emanashi Ranja, Zintana, the Mandu Resungora. tsukdub dindu so dala shene rwa nawa linglin de ransor shane soso nan de yage tarab jina ko yuji ngone so lingin sa ko neba jange ko lejo samsade chakbe yure jina be yidong ara shibje tonje te yugi ngone yidong ara ji tone soso semda tende de jinde me go she chi yebe na sha gyora teso shane sungora dalish nawa linglin sidu rangune so lingin sa so ngade yodo seroje yukurang ngone shibje zene nye yuba taksuba jesuba rachi tine raya yuba rachi je tongyong goyara di yuwa ma reso goyara tinde je kasa lang linglin di kasa dalishin nawa linglin di ransur shane kagyu rajen shi so ande ta kaksa karesa namji soso nga daga sha yidwa da mewa trada nye da kanga di tada ti tagara rangja sha ta rawa du druba yuwa ma re tsukdu du druba yuwa ma re se tinde samlutan dine sungora nawa linglin de ranso shane kasada nawa linglin de ranso shane kagyu rajen shi so ande kaksa tongpa nyi kaksa de rago yunge rabu sibu shenda shibu ji rangwa tuba rangya tuba singe shenda ji yube suri samlutan ki duwa sungora ti mandi re se tanda nga zo tong debe taga nane ko nane pa chi kagu yordo rawan tu tuba mendo ina tenji rebar juwan suki tandu 대환도 동행도 텐데 삼당 구요도 가자 라자제 소원도 돼서 디데 아마에 시레 되나서 동반이세 되나 송고요도 아니 라라링리 되게 면도서 텐데 라라링리 라조 용게서도 라완도 두바랑 신두바시데 신다지와 말에서 나라서 통대 되나를 랑원에 두바 통고로 디파까고래 송고도와 뭐 되시요나
So here, when it comes to the kind of presentation of Lama Tsongkhapa, here, when he's talking about whether there is a self or there's no self and so forth, when we are coming to understand this idea of no self, we need to sort of have an idea of how that I appears to us. So normally when we have this sense of I or this self, it's something connected with our 5 aggregates, our form, our feeling, our discrimination, mental consciousness, as well as our sort of karmic formations. It appears in a way as though it has some sort of like autonomous or independent existence. It's not as though the self appears to us as something that is merely designated on that basis of those aggregates, but rather we have this way in which the I appears to us as though it were like autonomous or independent in any way of our mental labeling and designation. So really it's only independence upon designating on the aggregate that we can say like, oh, that's Tashi or that's Tundrup. But when we search for them within that basis, we can't actually find that person. It doesn't exist in the way that it appears to us. So here, when it comes to the kind of way that the I normally appears to us, this is what we need to investigate and analyze. See how it is that we have this sense of an I, as though it had some kind of inherent existence or autonomous, independent existence. It is by negating that I, as it appears to us, that we benefit our mind. It is the way that everything appears to us, all kind of pleasant or unpleasant objects, our friends, our enemies, they all appear to exist in this way, rather than the fact that they're like designated on many parts. Like when we think something like house, it appears like there's a house there from its own side, not depending upon our mentally designating it on this collection of parts, like the walls and the ceiling and the windows and so forth. And so we need to have that kind of a good understanding, have identified and recognized how it is that things normally appear to us, in order to be able to understand their emptiness of that kind of inherent existence. So in his text called Recognizing My Mother, that by Chankya Ropwe Dorje, he gives a kind of explanation of the way that we can go astray with this. So he says, there seem to be among today's scholars some caught in a web of words like thoroughly withstanding and true existence. And so there are those who, rather than actually sort of looking at the way that things appear to them, looking at that actual appearance, they instead get sort of caught up in the terms of like something that could withstand analysis or something that's truly existent. And they leave the way that things actually appear to them in this way, just sort of how it is, and it's like they're searching for something else, somewhere else to negate as the object of negation. So here, I'll just read the rest of the verse. It says, again, so there seem to be among today's scholars some caught in a web of words like thoroughly withstanding and true existence, who seek to negate some creature with horns, while leaving in fact intact this everyday appearance of solidity. And so this is, we need to be able to recognize the way that things actually appear to us. We can't just sort of leave the way that things appear as though they were inherently or as autonomously existent, and then kind of search for something that is the lack of true existence or emptiness out over there, while just leaving the appearance of things like our friends and our enemies, pleasant and unpleasant objects. So here it's important, again, when we are negating this sort of self, that it is a self that has that kind of independent, autonomous existence that isn't dependent upon our mentally designating it. But that kind of not finding such a self doesn't negate the existence of a dependently designated, dependently originated self. That kind of self does exist, but we need to examine the way in which it exists to us and actually negate that kind of false appearance, rather than search for something else as the object of negation.
Oh yeah. Don't you put it link shooting one in there. Oh yeah.
So now we'll look at the actual text.
Oh yeah. That ambu link shooting go to the cardosana. Tinjungi sule tawa suzustoa. Tension dever joa sule teletene, titonene, tawarwa, tameba, metabada, Jigdanji Chebabo, Mayudan Karish, that nature Kanga de Tito and Tanapagure Sungura, Sungur Chemajo, Tishuna Sungura, de la Guara, Tinjungi Sule, Tawatsu, Tawasu she, Lam Drevi Namshala Soba to the Samba Yoshoda, oh, Tinduko, Tenjin Devanjo, Tsute, Samlutane, Teletene, and then Robokorang and Nature Mune, the Haku Segura, and Ransom Samlutan. Shandash Samlutan, Nobo Judan Kian Tenji, Debar Juma, Tele Samlumadane, and the Shandash Samlutan, the Chior, Mayor, Sigdan, and the Trumgis on the Chandora, Trums and Agora, or the Trumgis on the Chandor. Tendema Rechera, Nobo Koran Judan Kian Ten in Juada, and the Taxidan, Doxilla Tenepa Tagba, or Telene, and then Nobo Tower, Metatung, Tontamilla Sobo, at the Sangmat of the Nature Unit, Telten Circus.
So here then to start out with the actual text, sort of giving the kind of preface to this text that is understanding reality by means of this teaching of dependent origination. So here, the sort of a reasoning of dependent origination, this is the kind of a logic or reasoning that can lead to all of the different kinds of understandings. So when it comes to the kind of knowledge of the base, the path, and the result, all of these things can be understood, including impermanence and selflessness. They can all be understood through the logic, the understanding of dependent origination. Now, again, this is something where we shouldn't sort of understand it as like a type of story or something that's out there or over there that's not applicable to actual reality, but rather we need to understand dependent arising as the things that the way that things actually are. So this is a kind of foundational understanding that allows us to gain understanding of other topics and reasons.
Oda tuba kangi tenjin debar junga rawan do tembar zebe esudwa tuba sanje chum dende sigurno tuba sanje chum dende chidang tuba sede ko nyomola soba ko lunga yesongi choba chama tamje ngeba chama tamje pa mebesen sambul so gyura yezan tuba sigdo cholam chama sem sambu sam ngeba chama pa shane 어딘데 tuba wangbo tuba mangbo yebe nane ti wangbo chokdo gyurba shada tuba kange ese sanje chum dende shura tenjin debaran jonga rawa do dambar jebes sanje chum dende ge tala sobe chende sama tamje tenjin debar jonga re ese son yore tenjin debar jonga tia ta tidu sa kagali ena ko dingele hindu da tezu choto tarde yorno ta ge chambu yora o tezu kavliya ane 르지기 땡주스 르지 지요라 르지 땡주날 가래 송이나 뜻 상마 덤바레세 딜레 라바정 가라조 셴 하고야 요 말에서 거라 르지 참마세 대기비 마제 배치긴스라 랑신기 기부 좀겐 수지요 말아 거라 랑신기 중에 지긴세 르지 시세 르지 배치지요라 다 디날 셴 시샤제제네 줍다다 강가 샤비와라 다 토바 산제 좀 된데 근데 소야 돼 르지기 슝제제 빼르지 때제 기초 슈샤가 된데 말에서 쓰와라 토바 강게 땡진 데버는 좋아 라완도 좀 버져서 코라 라완게 세네 토삼시네 꼼잡네 켄네 아니 송샤버지를 마도 신다게 르지기 슝레 셴네 기초 키고 디나든데 샤샤 디레스 말에서 거라 다 디도 산제 손도 빼도 사반을 해대와라 현대 강가치 셰스는 되게 르지기 땡지고 쇼래 군께전 디나 딘도아 데데레스 셰리오라 산제 좀 된데게 때다 딜레 때메 고바 때다 미팅보 망부 용고하다 어디 손자 라와도 좀 봐서 티고 가라 투바 강게 땡진 데바는 좀 라와도 좀 버제베세 덤발라나 메바다세 어 땡제 손데 땡진 데바는 좀 손자 라와도 주베 동바레세 최상마 düzeki çözsem tamca küden kendi tenjin dene ne ya tukugurese küden kendi dene ya tukugure ne koran tudusan şaşe mambo çene tezole tözin dene löpa tane de nyugure de kaware de kangbare de pumbare de şengdore de kuşurese fata korwa o tesonza tenjin debar joa sora küden kendi tenjin küden kendi dene joa se tiler koşore 교단에서도 년행기 교대를 쓰고 와라. 깨서는 현재 지견들을 쓰고 와라. 년행기 교수는 그 유지기 교대를 나라주 신거리 때문에 사비 맞다고 해줘라. 년행기 교라. 그 교내에 저부리 차오라. 현재 지견에서 사다 추다 매다 롱다 저다 실에서 뭐 어떠서 강갈 현재 지견이라. 대니갈 고쳐라. 교단 깨서 강가 땡진 데버는 좋아. 라와도 덤버제베 덤발라나 메바다. 덤바 산제 좀 된 되겠대. 텐데다 텐데 인베션에 동바 어로와 텐데 송바데 덤발라나 메바데세 덤바 마부 예베나네 초도 주바 코나 메바데세 드로엘라마르 주바 yen라서 드로알야 랑도 친지말로바 땡게게데네 라마르 주바데세 덤바 땡게진 드로아 남 소요 통메시세 덤바 산제 좀 된데제 드로아 가라서 시고도 미다 하다 라마이다 전도라 소바타조 드와레 두치네 치도 껴와치 글랑한테 풍부터리야 껴와치 글랑한테네도 도스도 드와스도래 기치치네 치도 규든 드와툴레 안도 스코르게선 드와스로 아니 진이게 드와남세 소 토메 시선 드와 저 상마 시라를 도부양야게 시조다 대주 가르에서나 저 통매 시대에서라 랑이 경험에 내로라 친지로도 삼바 텔레세 소소게 뭐본 소소 다다 셴다 수다 테로레자 론제 도줄 다다데 노르게 요레세라 친지로도 심바서 뭐에 내줄 가래 임바 공업에 내준 거네 가리 내되나 대다 메튼 바체정 아주 tro다네 딱 요도 어디 손잡고 친지로도 삼바텔레스기도 네 ngwe da shen da la so ngwe to zo so samlu ta ne pa samlu ta da de norge yo re so ra chiji lo se ne ngwe ne su da metin ba jimba de la chiji lo se ra yang da ba me ba yang da ba ta lo so je ne chiji lo to samba tele se roa de da ni ku ba na zo je nyen bar se ne roa de zo dongye da chi ku ba kyo mang bo yang de kang ga so samlu ta da ma di nor tele tene lunga ke choba cheda mandi nor o tele tene ne tonge mambu nyante to se ti signe so gora kuba na zo ji nyembar signe se tene kuba na zo ji nyembar signe a di ngiro kuba na zo ji nyembar signe mare ala di gabde no adi chimbo ora kuba na zo je nyambar si ne se na ro de si ne ro ane ro de da kuba le yon so number 2 a cha se ro de da kuba am ke tunge la so ba tu ke de le yon so 2 cha se tembe chu nam je ne lu chi ta wa shin do rab de tembar kon de kon jo samlu ta da de nor ge yora shin ju lo do ji ge yor do o te samlu ta da de yang da ba chi ta wa shin do ko ha ko ye ta da la so go ra tembe chu namje nelu chitawa shindo chu namje nezu ngone de ngarazu samba na shingi no du yo to ti ma de res je po tengo sam kone sugora chitawa shindo ne webe ne chu chidar ne ba na shi don le ne ba na shi pa tembar konde konzo tengo sam konzo hako a che she ko sam te dala tenjin de baran jowe jowa tembar je o te zulia tenjin de baran jowas temban sevare sora tende che chode tenjin debar jo sonza ani tatele mabudo juda kela tenjin debar jo sonza midabare keji juro chen midabare ro juda kela tenjin debar jo sogwa mabuji kado da ibda kambare chena shingdo go tombure chena chashe mabuji le tene ani de kushu tombure sena pa tagre do chasze te dal tene pa ta yo do tele taxi dan chasze la tene ta pa so ora tension de bar jo sne tene ta was oh ya tene a chuna ne lu chi da do do nam disa te dal tension de bar jo temper je ba yin so ya tene ma ta chi chuna mamu cha.
So here to begin then from the first chapter that's giving the purpose of giving the name dependent arising, or how to seek reality by means of the Buddha's teachings on dependent arising. So here it says the sage, the Buddha, is regarded as the unsurpassed teacher or guru of all beings because he understood and taught the way of dependent arising through his own direct experience. So here, this sort of sage, what is being translated as the sage, is really referring to this kind of attainment of the Buddha. The Buddha has gained this supreme attainment, made all of his body, speech, and mind completely pure, and in this way is sort of has attained this supreme kind of attainment. And he did this through his own understanding of dependent arising and through his own direct experience. So there were previously various Hindu schools, including those that say looked to the Vedas as an authoritative source. That was something that they would base all of their kind of understanding on. And as opposed to that, the Buddha taught this teaching of dependent origination based upon his own kind of realization. He didn't depend upon some sort of text or something that was seen as being authoritative, but rather through his own development of wisdom and through his own experience, understood this way of dependent arising, and thus was able to teach this to others. It is independence upon the Buddha's understanding of looking at the fact that all compounded phenomena arise due to causes and conditions, and even those things that are uncompounded, are dependent upon their various parts, the whole upon the parts, and they are dependent upon our mentally labeling and designated. So here, those kinds of, when we look at things arising from causes and conditions, that level of kind of dependent origination, we can see that there's that level of being causal as well as being dependent of the parts, sorry, the whole on the parts and parts on the whole, as well as dependent on our mentally labeling or designating things. So when it comes to things arising causally, we can think about the substantial cause. That is the sort of thing that is the real sort of, like if we have, for example, a seed gives rise to a sprout. That seed is the substantial cause, and all of the coordinating conditions are the soil and the water and so forth. And so it is then by way of this kind of understanding that the Buddha gained, that he then taught this to other sentient beings. So the Buddha perceived that all living beings are afflicted with a variety of problems because, as an initial cause, they misconceive the way things are. And so, motivated by the wish to show precisely the ontological status of all things in order to completely free all beings from these problems, the teacher, the Buddha, revealed the truth of dependent arising. So here, the word that Geshe is using in the Tibetan is sort of that for living beings is goers. I mean, the reality is we are cycling, taking up one kind of existence and going into another. And so really, the Buddha looks at this situation of all sentient beings such that they are, the initial cause that leads to this kind of cycling is their misconceiving the way that things are, the way that we see, the way that all things that we see and perceive all various objects and hear sounds and smell and so forth is in a way that we misconceive those objects, and thus due to the kind of elaboration of our wrong thoughts we create all of the kinds of problems. All of the various faults come from this. And so to show the way that we are mistaken, the Buddha gives this teaching on dependent arising, reveals the truth of dependent arising in order to help those beings. So we can see that all of, like for example, dependent origination can establish that things are impermanent because they come about only in dependence upon causes and conditions. There's that recognition that they are impermanent. They are subject to causes and conditions. And we can see too that they are interdependently originated in the sense of things are based upon or are dependent upon their basis of designation, the whole on the parts, and so forth. And so the Buddha, recognizing this as being the sort of fundamental cause of being sufferings, taught dependent origination in order that they might be freed from those.
Oh yeah. Tang zhuwa namla nyeso juwe ju nyeso juwe ju so chi karesana. Judan drebu tende ra judan drebu tende lamsina dra. Julen drebu jungzude. Junde tende sinadra ju kana tene drebu kare yongi wadi abuji mashin za tiwanga yongi ware sungwara psike wara. Julen drebu chidar juwe tende chishin meshi badase. The leg umbrella sober pena susu tewanduna, the way you do two machines, shandashi troop, and the chinjula sombanashi. The one do yatim will be ranged to our tratanisms. Tungen don't do semi yatungen yilang but jukse. In you, the one do we are a tungen do amara. That the autoya and dalangas and ash was a top with some Nanzishuk buke. Anything Tabshil Zedis and Shalet Sawala Sobada, Leganundru Mambucha, and the little Tunga. Yangunetane soso dawa yongo yona tewe kyude yabu sambu chi trupche ane teletane dawa yonga drebu dawa yongo yardo sako fitangara dawarwa yabu re shibuchi yongo shudu nganzi shukchimbu shike tewange tala shensha shukchimbu shike ane ngaye tedu tondade kechimbu shibuchi sor te truye chagin liya mishandal sawa cheko na sunshi eko na trama cheko na rawa suzu mako na 가르쳐거나 어떻게 강가 연구하다. 그래서 주단 레뷰 텐데데. 주델 때네 레뷰디 연구를 해서 야보지 신선하네. 주디 좀 레뷰 상부디 연구라. 레뷰 멤버 요 주디 딘디레 They are Medu Samji Abu Hakosne, Debu Neba, Judy Pass Selne, and Sambuya Judy Trumni Sambu Yungura. Or Tim Machine be one guinea. Do you tell one dejan to you my rubish to make Judy Troop? To make Mendojan, to read the social legacy, to make you Judy Troop dinner, and to make a Yungi order. Oh, this order. Oh, so Judan Drebu, Tendelam, Julian Drebu, Children, Tendi Chishi Machine by the Chile, Sierra. Tene Chokoranging Olia, Chokoranging Oya, some of the Chönam Rangi, Daxila ten, Tedan Drever, Luido, Juan Zambi, Chörangi, Tangi, Yeva, Mesam Sheswara. That's the Cambodia in Andra, Tai in Andra, Shingdong in Andra, Kare in Andra. Nakse inadra, Zambuli inadra karina, Chunam rang dakshiletena, Koran dakshichi yora, Dakshisu tambu toyagichi yora, tele, Chershi tambu chare shiji korva, Dakshichi mena ko taya yomarto, Namba tombol paten ke medo rechi res taya ke medua. Salma tedite lomadasi no odi medo chi reshase, Kangbarizine koke guntons no odi Kangbar reshase. Tita Reshas and Dipala Reshas and Nipa, Dying Gorabaj Thompson, Sobra Thompson, or Teacher Reshas, Tambu Churches, what tell it Dashisiwara. Tell it now they come by Reshas, these Midripchina, Susung Washington, Tarumuna in the Hakuma, Suzy lesson, oh, the treasure Resha, or Tindu Reshas, Combat Japna, in Adra, don't have toss Thompson, and she near our Tita Reshas Pata Hagdua. Tell it Dashisiwara. Whereas the Kansa Dashi de Pumbunga di Ordo, Chilonita de Sobolitene Mangsha Dagra, Soboda, and Kezi Shetaya, Tende Dashi Gurdo. And so sometimes the Mangsha saw Tawarechon, Tangatri, Kibu Medusa, Tungerechon, Yao Medusa, the Ritangana Vidusera, Nasachilitan and Pa Dagidua, Dashi Pumbunga Suda, Suji Pumbu, Soya Pumbu, Dushi Dushi, number she Pumbunga said. Dag Dashi there, no. Dashi Pumbunga Bokaruchilitan and it asked for Dagiora. Oh, this order. Taxi did the race for Lopa Tabadelisora. Dashi Char Teletan and did the race for Le Tagiora. Oh, Jolisiora. Oh, Shunam Rarang Dashi Latin S. Kangbe Dashi Ki Wunda Toda, Rochik Bada, Shashamambu Shoulder. Chono Rangi, Tandabs and Pumbunga was Chonam Rangi, Daxilet, Shingdon Dabsini, Yagada Lomata, Tenichi Yang, La Soba Pakbata, Daximangu, Ratazu Sobalitan, the Shingdore, the combustion, the Kushu Tombures, and the Tagardo. Chonam Rangi, Daxilet, Ted and Drever, Luido, Joa Zambi, Ted and Dren, Daxichi, Telepalo Tane, any Daxitanamdo. Loy Trubatalia, Yavashawi or no. Tetan Devar Louis de Chua Samji, Tetsamge, nature that Rebe Kochera, Palandabji, Gondabji Tonche, oh, the Palandashas Patarva, Daxilet and Palo Tasso, Tetsamjiko Palayimba Trupsare, Palayimba Tacho Sara. In a Garazo, Palasade, Daxichi Chati, Belova, Takwa Sami Samgamara. That's something Hajimba, Tobeta Marisa, Koran when a Palayida in Lucisu, Tribuyore, some Gora. What tell Pala Rawan to Trubanjimbasora, Peter Palangorava, Palan Soborova, and Palan Koraya, the Magici Yevesodi, Chargito, Rawan to Atiso. Rara get Daxila Tene, Teta and Deo Luido, Joa Samji, Churara Getani, Yeva Messamshes. So Pena. Tanda was in a social sobolate, so we could get a job Druina, and the Tanda we use a combative Tanda we use a Tindico, Daxilatane, draw the Tagidua, come back with your escape, or tendency rush the Tanda who does Skeleton Shaguda. In a drawbo, says, I'm do you some garanson, not do you some Gadua, near Rawarabs and to give a nose you are to take your Mara. Lamga Yogure, Uptansa Yogure, and it could your Chagure Zata, so good Zata to the Kanga, Lagachagure, and she never does a shower. 오늘 이제 강반 대기 조시요 람을 되시고라 아니 가도스 따기요 마도 드라보 라와지 람파샤 강바파샤 현단 종게지도 요마로 이나 내 도예 삼사 드라라와지 요바 삼겨라 가라죠 진짜시 대단 드와 로유도 그래서 최남 라라게 닥실라 때네 대단 드와 로유도 중화 잠제 최랑게 당이 여바면서 코랑 어디 여바래서 대잠제 샤고 마임바 가라 삼르나 최남제 라게 라게 고 닥실라 때네 닥실라 때네 독제스 다다 똑바니들 독제스고라 디치지레 샤스 테파타 그래 소소로가 지지레도 와서 러파타 그래 독제들 다다 로니 요거라 자에 타냐다 로에 타냐스라 민지다그라 디치지레세 타냐스도 이마이 가가서야 된다로 적수에서는 디장야 거라 가요에서 직장자 신다바 다시 타냐스 이마이 가가서 자에 타냐다 로에 타냐스니 도체제 자도기 타냐섬 제 마침바 자다 떡바게 타냐 딱바sam기 마침바 딱바sam기 다 유수 좋아라고 내지 마침바 축도 제외 니도 받다고 라와함서 축도 받다고 지체나 가그레스나 다다치 니에 받다고 생겨와라 라와함 들 라와서 그래 타냐기 왕게 샤고 많이 봐 고랑원에 수 줍대가 들 라와서 봐 그래서 딸도서 telha daji chawane kashingo bunam ji shala rama lebe ngo rangshi te te meba ne tama bose digu rawa meba de tena dani yoma yinsi kasi lung dali shesemba rawa range ngo truban zimba yin la asa ote rawa du truban range ngo truban zimba resa pena o diba de chidi
So here, continuing, it says, the main cause of all the troubles in the world is our ignorance. And this is twofold. First, we do not precisely understand the dependent arising of causes and effects. In other words, how effects depend upon their respective causes for their production. So here, we don't always have a clear, good idea of the relationship between cause and effect. We want to have happiness. We don't want to suffer. But as Shantideva has said, it ends up being the case that we basically destroy all of the causes of our happiness and end up, even though we don't want suffering, running towards it because we're creating all of the causes for our future suffering. So here, we generally have this sense of like a strong sense of an I, and then out of that strong sense of I, we want happiness for that I. We want all good things from that. And that's really the source of all of these various faults that we develop, all of the kinds of things like non-virtues that we engage in is really from that fundamental misapprehension and not understanding that we are in reality creating the causes of suffering rather than creating the causes for our happiness. So if we really had a good understanding, we would not create those kinds of bad causes, those things that would lead to our future suffering, but would instead only create those kinds of good causes. So here, when we that is one of the kinds of ways in which we are ignorant, in terms of ignorant of the, we don't understand dependent arising of causes and effects. And then secondly, we do not think about how things derive their respective identities and become an object of the mind merely by our imputing a term or concept onto their parts, their so-called basis of imputation. So here, when it comes to like looking at the nature of any sort of object that arises to us, the I, the self, a house, our friends, our family, all of our craving, the world, all of these various things, they are designated in dependence upon a particular basis of designation. There needs to be this basis, this arising or appearance in order to do that kind of designation. It's not like if you just have like an empty space, you can't talk about anything. You can't, there's nothing on which you can designate a particular object. Like when it comes to a person, when we say, oh, there's that person over there, it's independence upon seeing, say, their form aggregate or the collection of the aggregates that we designate, like say maybe it's how they walk. There's a certain sort of movement of that form, and on that basis we say, oh, that's that person. Or on the basis of hearing their voice, we're able to say, oh, that's that person, and we designate in that way. And so the kind of thing, like when we say experience the suffering of being sick, it's only in dependence upon having that negative feeling or whatever it is that we are able to say, I'm sick. Everything in this way is dependently designated. It's not just sort of dependent upon cause and effect, but it's also the case that everything, our self, our house, all objects are merely designated, imputed by, as it says here, term and concept. So when it comes to, we can sort of designate with a thought, with that kind of concept, and then we can also use the various terms. So it seems like when we say have a house, that there's something that appears from the side of that isn't dependent upon our designating on the basis of the collection of walls and windows and roof and so forth, that it's not like we think that that house exists by mere designation, by mere imputation. Rather, it seems to be able to be something that like exists in its own right. But this is the case for everything, like our sense of an eye. It's something that's merely designated on whichever of the aggregates, they're either 4 or 5, or like we think a tree, it's something that's merely designated on that collection of branches and leaves and so forth. So that mere appearance is all that is needed to satisfy existence. Like when we have the thought cow, like we see on the basis of particular form and we designate cow, that designation satisfies existence of a cow. We've established the existence of the cow. But if we think that, oh no, there needs to be something really that's there that I can point to within the basis of designation, then we sort of run into this problem. It says we think instead that if we searched for what they truly are, these various things, we would be able to find them. So we think that if we could sort of look within that particular basis, we would be able to find that thing. But yet, it's not the case that there's something that like exists independently of that labeling or designating process. Like when we see someone and we think like, oh, they're going along, it seems like that's just something that is happening from its own side. It's not dependent upon our mentally labeling it, mentally designating it. There being some kind of movement that whole and the parts and the whole that is designated on the parts and so forth. So in this way, we have this sense that there must be something that's really there beyond just sort of the terms that we put on things or the concepts that we use for them. Instead, it really is the case that designation is the extent of existence. There's no sort of existence beyond that. Yeah, we want to search for something that is more solid. This is the way that we are, this second kind of ignorance.
Tempe nas tadabu son chibare chishegora tadabu se soso kansa soso tabu sonas tadabu rangshingi tuber nanshe sangarazu soso samutana nganga se de shenda dashi chashe maimba mambuchi la tene ni pa tasha be so de sorgmedwa sobuda semda soa da tezole tene ni me tashi tundu silabe 대삼제 네 다 주방이 삼고 말해. 텔레 로스 치고 라완도 나랑 그 예 삼사 텔레 로스 치예 삼고도 나 라완에 예세. 라완에요. 랑경네. 랑신지요. 현다도 루루chen 마이게 같이 수치고 말해. 랑신지 쪽 라완에 쪽 그래. 라완도 쪽 그래. 지삼기와도 호텔시 그래. 배나 다다부 랑신지 주방 Rangshinji Tubar Nangshin, Tetaran Simbe Ngada Nyambe Samsi Ngasa, Nyambe Ngarawa Tubachi, and a Ngelu Rwa, Mi Nawa Na Che Shenja, and then Long Jaja Sutra, Ro Rexala Sopa, or Tesul, and Shenjaki Yoda. Tambungashitala Shenjo, Tag and Dishing will a Chagi Basido, and then Sujun Chender Army by enrolling in Chichuateletus. Tambungasan Sam Shukshan Bashikor, Rawanga Man and Gangun and Nisuti, Rawachi Medua. Rawachi Yuna Kotseni Raya Yokorwa. Takseva, Cheseva Tabutungura, Takjachena Chi Raya Yova, Chevacheni Chisejutan and Sejutan Yubes of the Surgudomado, Zuzu Meves of the Jimido, Remedua. Nazuti Yore, Debun dance and get your Tata combat your that combating Sagan your Tina Suma Mambu Yore, Suma Mambuche Shingi Jesu. And then like what to say, changes and battles, your battles, to load to Marco, and it you can show. But she not about it, Cashet into the Tayakana to Loyakana sing the Nala trumpet, sing the tongue by the in a part that is all what the two ships of Madamada guarded into the Mabuyore. This is in the Mama in the voice. Cashet should part that to Loyamuti, pushing to the Sayara. When it's in do some Sarashara. Sob cigarette, sob nashi Sarata. But Tangone, Tambuton, and she yamara. You're not picking putting on a carrot and set it to Lord, Yakana to Lord Dora. Pajuri Shinkashes or Makeo Mara. Or Tinashi Castle. Tata Buranshi Trubar, Nanshe, Narazul so the Ranshi Rango Nagara. Tetan Zimbang Adanga be some ending some Shukshan Buddha, ending as a long church and church to Shinja Yungora, Nays and some Shukshan Buddha, ending some Shukshan Yungora. Nadanga be some Sanjira regular, Kundu Yoba Yeshi, Tinga Razicul Namjiora. Nanjupene Ma Jabja turn to any Hakoda. So Kangbayan, so Yes, Shibuya, Tobago Jam, Major Jackson, near turn, the Zangas in Sosa Nayakim, Nadang Sakim Medua. Or take several day married Sosin to you some cooked. Tinaka soda. Some Zulangi Yava Yeshira. This she and answer. This she and tell a tennis soda. Da Dagiwa das, and it Sapsa, Ne Sapsa, Ranging ended and Nang me Samsa, Ne Miri Samsa, and Ne Lumba Sasa, Ne Chulu said that Chokmambu Tigriva. Tayen and the Namdrik of Sunguda, Tayen and the Shandoshis, Tasha challenge in there. Now I said some Shukshan, but you said, and then I is a chair, and then Ganzo said, Chore Tigre. Simjan Ganga Davandula Dumimido Chibari de Chori teacher, Gesada Chorting in the Chulu Chorting in the Lumbe Chorting in the Diana and Shandushes. Tasha challenge in that now. Chatangi Dungura. Did that done in the Nibatam and Ganga, Lang and Basaya, Sama Yungurado. The other one, Nibatam Joy user. Rancho da Shanjo Sero. Shows on the answer. Chatan so cover Tamja Joa in Shes. What about the children this one? Yeah.
No. So here, for instance, when we each have an ever-present and instinctual notion of I and mine, to which a self appears to exist in its own right, and that assents to this appearance. So here, when it comes to like our own individual self, when we think I, we have this sense of there being something that is not dependent upon that basis of designation, that is not dependent upon our designating with terms and concepts concept on that particular basis, or like a whole dependent upon parts, or something that is dependent upon causes, but rather it seems like there's something that exists solidly from its own side, that has this kind of autonomous, independent sort of existence. And then based upon that kind of sense of I, and grasping at that sense of I, we then give rise to this sense of mine, like my body, my eyes, my ears, my enjoyment, the various possessions and things that I have, the tastes and smells and touches that we interact with, we then grasp at as being mine. And so as Chandrakirti has said in the entry to the middle way, first, with the thought I am, they cling to a self. Then, with the thought mine, they become attached to things. Like buckets on a water wheel, they turn without control. I bow to the compassion that cares for such suffering beings. So this is really the way in which this process kind of goes. We think we have this sense of there being an I as really existing like autonomously, independently of any kind of designation. And so too, those things, those possessions that we enjoy, and it appears as though they like had this kind of existence that is not dependent in any way, but they don't actually have that sort of existence. And so for example, there is a drepung, like I guess they like sort of put kind of clothing on these things that from a distance it looks like there's sort of a big impressive kind of person, but when you get closer you can see that it's just like wrapped up in these clothing. You take off the clothes and there's nothing actually there. It appears as like a real being. It appears to us that all of the various things that we interact with and enjoy, and that self, that I that enjoys them, has that kind of real existence from their own side, but they don't actually exist in that way. So that kind of innate mind that grasps at an I, that thought of I and that thought of mine, arise and become then the sort of fundamental cause of all of the various sorts of sufferings that we experience. It is, as Dharmakirti has said in his Pramanavartika, the Compendium on Valid Cognition, that first we think of this I, and then we designate other, and based upon that we have attachment for our own side and animosity toward the other side, and from that we engage in all various karmas. Thus it is from that sense of I that all faults arise. So we divide, like when we think I and mine, we sort of have our side, whether that's based upon, as it continues here, based upon this idea of I and mine, we conceive of things in two groups, like anything associated with ourselves, myself, mine, my family, my race, my country, my religion. We find all of these ways to designate between this sort of self and other, and anything associated with others, that is like everything else. So in this way, based upon this fundamental, instinctual, innate notion of I, and then the mind that arises from that, so too come all of our attachment and animosity from that fundamental mind.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Indutaka Sunganzo number Sanji Sombana Shira. Give Chungi Samlu Rechina. Ko Tenika Shidaka Yungumaro. Naran Keshu Yins, Tindra Keshu, Rangitawa to be Keshu, Rangikangase Keshu, Ranginami Taito Chair the Keshu, Kangase at the water the Keshu days. The Inaya Rankeshu in a deodis. Shalia Rangi Tawa to be at Kangase at the Shalatsawasu Marichara. Teach any deora. Koran Keshu, Kame Keshu, Nami Keshu, Dura. Koran Lumba Keshu, Dura. Keshu in a deora. Diana Susu Lumbata, Susu Namita, Susu Kerketalia, Mishandalia, Sawachan de Romara, never Chan de Romara. Rake Shimbu, Makibuchun Kasuna, Keshu, Ranlutan to Mada, Tag Nami Keshu. Kitchenaya. Tag Namida, Susu Lumbet and Dalia, Kangese and Teatu to the Shell and never chanted the Mara said Chona Dedo. Korakation Butsi, Pacho de Koranzulega Chechu, Kachin Butsi, Susus, Yabujitane, Tubashoya Yomare, dancing bio marche chato ke cheko ma jab go ya de tende ke yo mara so te de 어 티텐데 말와 대체선에 당한 저 탑고래 콘저 팜고래 단다 예는 지금 말은 단다 전에 지금 말 콘저 도가 거가서 야가 거시라 아니 콘저 때 세고래 또고래 가르치네 제고래서 제 소소티데 요를 롱바 코란서 기부지 대죠 간저 야부지 때나 지금 로버라 시대는 때 현대적으로서 내가 맞게 되는 때 강가 끼어라 다들 삼기 말아 아주 쭉 전부 전에는 대화 연구를 사네 정말 조직 동해 마음마다 대화 연구하면 도와 야 뭐도 뒤뒤지라는 말이야.
So here, as the Buddha has taught then, when it comes to, say, the beings of small capacity, it's okay for those beings to hold themselves as most important, to recognize their own happiness as being most important, as wanting to relieve their own suffering more than others, and thinking about their family and so forth. But it's said, the Buddha has said, you can't harm others in the course of trying to accomplish your own happiness. It's okay if at that stage you still hold yourself as most important. You hold your own accomplishments or what you need as most important, your own country, your own family. Okay, that's okay for that to be most important to you. But you can't, maybe at that point you're not able to sort of give up that self-interest. But at least don't harm anyone else in the course of pursuing your own self-interest. That if you are able to, say, live in your own area and recognize, okay, I want to achieve my happiness, but I'm not going to look at the other who's next to me there in a way that I want to fight with them or be jealous of them or competitive with them. As soon as we get into that, then it's sort of like, when you get into this competitiveness and jealousy and wanting to have more than the other, then you can go into the place where you think, whatever I do, it's okay. It's in order to get my happiness. And so we might be in a position where you are willing to lie and hurt others in order to get what you need. But instead of that, at the very least, we should give up this attitude of thinking that it's okay to harm others. If we can ourselves be happy and look at others and say, may they be happy as well, even if you hold your own happiness as more important.
Yeah. 다 기분 등이라지는 야 뒤에도 뒤에 하고체 딱초다 현저체 저 말이세라 소소제는 미 지소 강가 미 강가 초지 소소 초래서 초지 버저디 초서 니 작당제는 지 말이 작당 요르 땅에 삼을 땅도 뒤에는 뒤에 야하러 와고 심지를 초를 주니 양이 거실이 로버치 거실이 간시 진리 제고 매서도 기부 첨부라지는 데니 딱왜 현재 봐서 니 현대 소소단 자와 현대 직부다야 전부 다 소소를 현대를 로버 망 제고 된데 용도야 뒤집라나
And so the being of middling scope goes beyond that to see that, well, I shouldn't have attachment or hatred. If I want to get my own kind of freedom from suffering, I need to get rid of that kind of making distinction between self and other, and in that way undermine that kind of grasping at my own happiness and wanting harm to come to others. So recognizing others as like equally wanting happiness and not wanting to suffer. And in that way, even if you're striving for your own liberation alone, one recognizes the importance of getting rid of attachment and hatred.
Oh yeah, then my lordship, that's what I'm saying. Then Japan to ship to Sambanase, pension chick tenero, and the Kanga Yawa, that chick draw Yoba down to some Yabotan Bene. Then Japan to ship to Sambana, Novo Nam Rangi Dani Toba Nam Kujin dance. Dashidang, Dojila Tene Truba Nagi, Dadan Shen, so Loy Shimbewangi, Truba Le Rangshingi, Truba Tomba, Telado, Koar Nula Ase, what did it? So Dadan Shen said, she was just society there, mother. Shanga, some strain, the society, some girl, mother, Shandanga, some girl, mother, Shangitan Dugora, Shanda Suji Tenanga, society, Shandy Dora. nga samge de nga rawa chi shibuji tukku ni mi ka nga sosul te ne nga samza ngombo de la mesu te ne de ngombo re sam ge do ne so so nga sa rawa to tu ba shi ba chi na mi gang ge tong de nga re sam ta ti teng ma ra ke shen de che ke chung ju dang su dang ge do mi tam je so so ke chung ge dang le do ya ko nga da shen se rawa de tu ba chi yo ma pa ri su ru na shi tu tu yin so ra pajol denge de sujo de ridi tsuri is pajo parise so so pajo de chinso ya tsuri de dora sa ta da shen se de nga ra nga samja shanda ka shen sam gure shanda zo ka nga ya nga ra sa nga zo shen se tsu so so samlo tong jo chire ma do rawa do tu ba chi yo na so so ta de nga re de shen re se shen de ta ba re shen je de nga de ta ba re se nga wo nya ba lo che gure de me do pa ri tsuri na she samlo ju do do o te sonza ko rawando truba yo mares tutu ki chudi yangu samge na rawando truba mebe chudi talado ko ne gures o tiba do chi tunantis.
So here, then, again, I don't think I read this last sentence, that when we then have attachment for the former and hostility for the latter, and all our other problems ensue. So if you reflect deeply on dependent arising, you will understand that whatever identity things have is established in dependence upon a collection of causes and conditions, as well as on a basis of imputation and imputing terms and concepts. And so here, with this key point, you will see that things such as self and other are established by mere conceptualization. And from this, you can easily understand that they lack inherent existence or intrinsic existence. And so here, when it comes to like thinking self and other, we think I, and everything that is not that I is other. But from a perspective of that other, every single individual looks at themselves as I, and everything else is other. It's not as though there's somehow intrinsic existence from the side of that thing that is self, and then those are others. So it is on that basis of holding to a sense of I that we then kind of look down upon others. But there isn't an I or a self that is somehow independent, autonomous, not designated upon a particular basis. Again, it appears to us as though we have this self or this I that's kind of existent in its own right, separate of our designating it or being designated upon a particular basis of imputation with those kind of imputation, with those kinds of terms and concepts. So here, by understanding the way in which things are contingently designated, we can understand that they lack intrinsic existence. The kind of understanding of self and other is kind of like this mountain and that mountain. When we're here on this mountain, it is this mountain, and over there is that mountain. And we go over to that other one, and all of a sudden that is this mountain, and the previous one is that mountain, and so forth. So when it comes to self and other, these kinds of things are established merely by conceptualization. And from this, we can easily understand that they lack any kind of intrinsic existence. They only have a kind of contingent establishment.
Oh, yeah, that is so. This is also, yeah.
So the time is up for today, so we will stop there.
Oh, yeah.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous action spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niyatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness, powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi. May you stay until samsara ends. May the deeds of explaining and practicing the Dharma, done by groups supporting the teachings and their upholders, who spread the view of dependent arising and non-violent actions in the 10 directions, and especially at Shravasti Abbey in the West, flourish.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you so much, Geshe-la, and also Katrina, and we'll see everybody next week at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Krishna, Dundra Jema Jayong.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Bye-bye. Teacher. Oh, yeah. Just delay. Oh, that's 7 toss.
Recording stop.
Yes.
We have a lunch, Thanksgiving lunch. So everybody please go to the dining hall